Well, welcome back to the Seriously Don't Do That podcast. It's been a while since we've recorded an episode, but today I am super excited to have Todd Jenkins joining me. Todd's actually the perfect guest, I think, for what we're going to talk about. We can talk for a really long time, so we always have to kind of govern the amount of time that we spend. But he's a rare guest who brings both war stories and the leadership rebuild perspective. He walked into Codility after a period of turbulence, inherited a broken sales org, and is now actively relaunching their US go-to-market motion, but only after testing the hypothesis first. His journey validates the entire theme for this month. Don't hire a rep to discover your ICP. Build the system, prove it works, then invest in the hire. So, Todd, welcome to the podcast. Super happy to have you.
Super happy to be here, Dan. Absolute pleasure.
Yeah, well, as we talked about, and as our folks know, we're going to dive right in to the questions. You were employee number 4 at Stack Overflow in Europe. What's the biggest lesson that you learned from scaling alongside a brand like that?
Yeah. Stack Overflow is the most interesting story because I've never worked for a business with such a huge community of followers behind it. A little funny story because many people may tune in from various backgrounds, but one of the early stories I had at Stack Overflow was going to an event, an engineering event, and this was in the infancy of Stack Overflow in Europe at the time. So I turn up wearing a Stack Overflow t-shirt, and for the first time in my life, Dan, I felt famous. So people were coming up to me, approaching me. I felt like the main attraction to this event. And so I opened my mouth and told them that I was working in sales and not engineering. And then people kind of dispersed away from me. So you can kind of get from that story that we had this incredible brand and logo of pretty much entire market population. Everybody was using Stack Overflow to find answers to questions. But from a business perspective, we were less known. And in those early days, we were obviously a US founded business. Joel and Jeff, who were kind of very key to the early stages of the organization, both US based employees at that period of time. Obviously, Joel being the co-founder at the time. But in Europe, we were, you would walk into the people we were selling and nobody knew what Stack Overflow was. And I always remember one call I did with a company in the Netherlands, in Holland. And the person was disputing my claim of who we were, to the point of I had to ask them to bring an engineering leader into the room to validate that Stack Overflow actually existed. So it was kind of polarizing at the time where we had this great logo, great brand, very much connected to one part of the market. And then a part that felt like a really early stage startup with everything to do with business solutions and the marketing and brand itself. But connecting that story, so what we did really well and what I suggest that most founders do is if you have a community, you have a following towards the company or the thing that you're doing, connect the story back to your business solutions. So it sounds very authentic about the product that you're now offering off the basis of this large community that kind of exists. So there's a lot of lessons that I'm sure we'll kind of go a bit deeper and touch into, but it was a very interesting time.
Yeah, so one thing I want to dig into there, because I hear this a lot with our clients, is you're trying to maybe round the corner from a freemium type product to a paid product. So a lot of people opt to build their community first, which I think was true about Stack Overflow. But then you've got to round that corner to making money on it, and maybe even selling against the people that are using the free product. How did you do that at Stack Overflow?
It was always the challenge that we were faced with because if you know Stack Overflow being kind of the website it was, all of our business solutions would be in the early days like vastly advertising. So we had advertising for products, we had advertising for careers and jobs that all used to circulate around the website itself. We used to draw traffic from the community to land into, be it the business solutions or the kind of job pages or the employer brand solutions we used to sell. You've got to be consistently honest about whether you're delivering value to your community, and your community will tell you. So when you're measuring the correct things, measuring the click-through rates, but also measuring the success of the click-through rate. So is somebody going on to sign up to that job? Is someone going on to buy from that company that's advertising on the website? That's how you must determine whether you're giving true value back to your community. But it's often the thing that can put you out of business as well, right? So one bad move in that space and the community will start to go against what you're trying to offer from a business perspective. And then we were consistently measuring our traffic like monthly. And this would be a regular thing during all hands. How are we competing on traffic? How is our traffic being measured? And really the performance of traffic over time. But that was one of the things we worried the most about, which probably, Dan, held us back, if I'm being very open, from some of the ideas and things that we could have put into play. It also became the thing that ultimately helped the business to exit. So as you know, Stack Overflow had a very valuable exit a number of years ago now. But we started to migrate away from those kind of advertising solutions, which still existed, but building more private communities of Q&A. And that was kind of a key pillar of the final product, I would say, that Stack Overflow built before the exit, and something they've been doubling down on too as well. But it was very tough, if I'm honest. I don't think there's many SaaS salespeople or salespeople in the world that have a huge community that sits behind the product you sell. So at one point it was great. We have this huge traffic and stories to tell, but anything we do is quite reactive to the community as well.
Yeah, I think as I think about, the clients that I've talked with over the years, and of course the ones that we've worked with and I've been privileged to work with, I would say, like you, I would say that most of the time that approach does not work. I think you've got to have a really special, product and people that are working with it to make that. I think there's some attraction to that model because it feels like you're really growing. Like, when you build a community and you've got this kind of group of raving fans, it feels great. But I think rarely does it ever transfer into, I think, commercial success. There have to be some factors. Of course, you mentioned some of those there for it to really succeed.
Invest in the community. Stack Overflow, we had a lot of community managers. So our community team was pretty scaled up. But when I see other startups that have, and community, I think Stack Overflow is an example of a business that has a huge community, right? We had around 30 million active users at any period of time on the platform. That's a big community.
Right.
But many other solutions and tools that get built now come from micro communities. But often when I see those businesses, they're failing to invest back to the community whilst they're in that mode of scaling product. So you must invest back as you're scaling business solutions. And the advice that I give is listen. Obviously, don't listen to everything because you're going to get positives, you're going to get negatives on anything that you do. But you must have a foot in that camp always and know the direction of travel, where the community is going alongside the products you're scaling.
That's a great point, Todd, because I think you've got to look at that as one of your key investments, especially if you're going for an investment round. You're going to have to be successful. If you're building that way, you've got to invest in that community. That's just got to be a budget line, just like everything else, right? Because you want to have the community managers. So you went from that rocket ship, and then you walked into Codility. So what did you find when you walked in there?
Yeah, so I left 2020 and joined Codility for the first time. So this is my second time now. We'll get onto that later. Honestly, I found an incredible product that was undervalued by the team that I inherited at the point of joining the business. And that left me feeling great for the future. But there's a lot of hard work to do now. And that's kind of where most revenue leaders, if you're taking on new positions, typically you're moving in as someone's moving out, some changes happened, or in some instances you're growing for scale, right? So you have that moment where you're just kind of delivering on a playbook that's been built. But a lot of roles that exist in Series A to B companies that I'll typically find myself in will be you're going into to foresee some change. But But we had some great early customers. So it told me that potentially we had the ability to further adopt within the existing logos we had. But also that we had a number of logos that when I looked into CRM, they were not really being touched, or the value, and I will say the value of what we sold was not being communicated to the customers. And I find this a lot with many businesses and products is people get obsessed about the product. They get obsessed about like functionality, the things that it does. And every onboarding starts the same way. Oh, hey, this is a great product and you should check out this feature and it does this, it does that. And the question I always ask myself and ask my teams is, what's the value it's giving back? So I found this team where I would argue the product was the best product I'd represented to date, right? It did everything it said it did and more, but we had no ability to convey the value of that. So cold emails weren't landing, outbound was falling short, cold calls, we had nothing really to say. And so fixing that felt like the first thing to go and fix, and then determine who to go and sell to. So what was ICP? Was it going to be enterprise, mid-market, SMB? And then we were kind of in that COVID world. If you remember, Dan, in 2020, COVID starts to emerge. So I also entered the business where most enterprise businesses said, hey, look, we're going to stop hiring software for a period of time. So it was a, how can I put this? It was different from where I left Stack Overflow to join this. I won't talk revenue multiples here, but significantly less revenue than the company I'd left. But it was a very kind of interesting time.
So I want to take and talk about a couple of things that you mentioned in there. I think the first one that really stuck out was around talking about products. And I think a lot of I'm very fortunate to work with a lot of founders that are very, very smart, that either on the technical side, right? So they come from a software background and they've written an incredible, piece of software, or, because we work, with Greater Gain Group, we work in the healthcare space. So you'll get a doctor or maybe a person that is a very skilled informaticist that has put together great products. So I think the tendency is really to talk about the product, right? And by the way, they should, right? Because it's a great product. But I think it's how they talk about it. You said talking about the value. We talk a lot about kind of the problem or challenge that it's there to solve, because ultimately it's what's in it for me, right? We need to be talking with our clients and our customers about what does this do for them. And I think I think that all ties into some of the other things, but would be curious that the first time when you went to Codility, how did you kind of change that culture of talking about the product to talking about the problem or challenge?
So I really believe in this, and for any kind of sales leader that works alongside me, you've got to test the playbook, right? So I'd spent to that point relatively 9 years, I think, in B2B sales and selling firmly to the enterprise. 7 years, I'd say, selling into the enterprise motion. So I had a playbook that worked, right? Hey, Dan, I'm going to go and meet you, and in the first meeting we'll do this, the second meeting we'll do that, and when we do that sequentially, we get to these steps, etc. That's what the playbook does. But what am I saying and how am I saying it? And what feature or what product line should solve the problem you're going to tell me? And what type of question do I ask you? How do I frame it? Or how do we wrap around a small feature to solve a big pain point that you're going to go and mention? Like all of these things, they typically don't exist across sales teams, right? And what happens, and I bet this happens all the time. You go and look for a new product tomorrow, you shortlist 3 vendors, and then you sit for a rehearsed 60-minute demo. They ask you a few times, do you have any questions? And they recap and then try and pull you into the next step. But it's during those moments that I think you've got to kind of figure out what gets said in what order, and how do you connect back to, or what pain points are going to elicit kind of you becoming vendor of choice, or actually them thinking that your product is like a need to have versus kind of like a must have versus kind of a need to have. I think I got that bit wrong. But I think you get my point. So you've got to play your own playbook out. That's very, very, very typical. And I find a lot of sales leaders don't do that. Fear of getting it wrong or fear of not being able to sell. I'm not quite sure why it's so inherent within sales leaders. But for the first 4 to 5 months, that's all I was doing, joining enterprise calls, mid-market calls, and figuring out like, why were we struggling to convey our value? And then certain things started to hit with us as well. So certain things where we ended up having a win rate against our major competitor. And you never know the true data because you only can measure the cycles you're in. But I think we had something like a 65, 70% win rate against our major competitor. So when we joined, I got told we typically lose when they're in the room. And so we pulled that up by about 50%, which was pretty big for us at the point in time. But Dan, going back is you've got to run it yourself. You've got to see what the challenges for. You've got to have the conversations. You've got to listen to the buyers. And your buyers are consistently telling your sellers fact, right? They hemorrhage so much that information, but so much that information doesn't get through to the team, doesn't get into the playbook. And then I'm quite opinionated here, and I think the cycle in and cycle out of leaders. So typically we're seeing leaders with shorter tenures now, but what those leaders are doing is they're cycling in with an idea and a standardized approach that worked with them previously, not building on previous ideas of the past. So you must document everything you're doing, your findings, and then build upon those findings over the ensuing years. And that helps you to have like a rocket ship stable playbook that really lands with the customers you sell to.
I think one thing I want to emphasize is just getting in and listening to the customers. I mean, we always say because we'll interact with companies in a lot of different places, right? Sometimes they could be entering the US market. Sometimes they could be, scaling the first time, right? And kind of getting to that first growth plateau. But we talk about how critical it is that the founder be in or listen to those calls. Of course, today with everybody using, things like Chime or other, types of software to listen, or Otter or whatever you might use, you can go back but those transcripts are very, very, very valuable. I tell people if they are not capturing that is the gold, because like you said, that's where the customer's really sharing back, what they do. And I love your scenario about talking about demos and competing, because I think back a very long time ago when I first started at IBM, very early on in my career, I was headed into a presentation, and I had done, the first 8 slides were all about IBM. And I remember my mentor at that time took them and tore it up. And I was like, oh, that's rather extreme. But he said, it has nothing to do with us. It has everything to do with the customer and how you're solving their problem or challenge. And I think that was something that really, really stuck with me. So
practical, just to build, because we may lose, and sometimes practical advice comes out for the people that listen to this. But something I'm really proud of that we've done now is we're using conversational intelligence tools ourselves. I don't mind disclaiming I'm not connected, affiliated, but we use a company called Griffith. They're an up and comer, very much compete with the likes of Gong. But what we did in the business is we've built a Slack channel where every one, Dan, of our customer conversations is posted. So we get a summary, but also we have the ability to input fields into the call. So we may ask something like, did the customer have product feedback that our team should hear about? We have a global Slack channel that everyone participates in. And you can go into the Slack channel and you can figure out like very quickly, what are the customers saying? What's the sentiment? What happened during the meeting? But connecting the voice of the customer to your product, to your executive team, so our CEO gets access to all of our customer conversations as well at a drop of a hat. I really recommend that people and folks start to do things like this as well. Like, really don't hide your customers from the product engineering teams, the executive teams. And it's a real good practical advice that we've done. And that also helps iterate playbooks because you allow conversation to exist within your team. And I do think, Dan, that many revenue leaders feel like they're going alone. They feel like it's on their job, it's on their head to build a complete playbook. But your product leader may spot something and go, hey, when we talk about this topic here, our win rate seems to go up by 60%. So there's some really cool practical things you can do now with conversational intelligence.
Absolutely. And I think, we even internally, we use, again, not here to present any product, but we built our own LLM with our customer conversations, and it's great. I mean, a lot of the episodes that we do on here, Seriously Don't Do That, come from that, because we hear the same thing kind of over and over again. So yeah, I feel like we're in the golden age of being able to respond to the customer and really kind of pull that into our organization. So Todd, we talked a little bit about what you did with Codility. I'd like to shift over and talk a little bit about selling into the U.S. market, because I think we talked about that a little bit, and you kind of have done that twice. Maybe let's start with a story about, you shared it when we talked about the first time you sold in the U.S. and kind of how that went wrong.
Yeah. So I feel like it's been 3 times now, in fact, but I've had the unique position where typically most times you'll join a US based business and then you'll go and open up the EMEA regions.
Right.
Whereas
Right.
I worked for a UK based company going to America, and then the Codility story is slightly nuanced where we're rebuilding back into the US. But the first time with Stack Overflow, I won't mention the company name, but I got into a global role, which meant at that point in time, we dropped the counterparts on either side. So I was truly kind of a global exec on named accounts. And I remember the first conversation, it was the lady was based in the US, and the conversation started up incredibly warm. And in the UK, we're a little bit anti-sales, by the way. So you do everything you can to not mention the word that someone's going to make a purchase during the ensuing conversations. But in the US, it's great to meet you, Dan. Sell to me. What have you got? And where I failed was I started to proceed to do the normal patter, right? Get to know, ask some discovery questions, start talking about the value. And this lady looked horrified, and she was like, "So you came without a deck? You came unprepared? Where's your deck? Like, where's your your visuals?" In the UK, if you use a deck, people really switch off. So you do everything. Again, it's kind of anti-sales. As soon as you bring a deck out, people are like, "Oh, another sales conversation. What's this person pitching?" But it kind of started to teach me the cultural nuance. And it's very hard, unless you go and do and you fail, you have a story like that. It's very hard to understand the cultural nuance. So there may be people in the US that are going to listen into this, and they're going to go and sell to the UK for the first time. And hearing my advice will be quite jarring. Like, hey, drop the deck, just show up, just be yourselves, talk conversation. Don't do too thorough discovery where that person's feeling bombarded. But you have like so many different cultural norms to how people sell. But I remember walking away from that call thinking, I've got to get in gear here. You got to be prepared. You got to showcase. In the UK, you've done the research by being vocal. In the US, you've done your research by proving it, and it's going to come through the deck you're about to present. So that was kind of an early story, and it taught me a lot, if I'm honest with you, Dan.
Yeah, I think we work with a lot of European founders that are coming to the US, or I'll say broadly, people that are coming to the US from somewhere else. Or I could also say people that are in the US that are used to, being like a doctor, right? And they don't really, it's a little bit difficult for them to understand, okay, how do you turn that corner? And I think your point about it in the US, getting to value quickly and what's in it for them, you've got to do that. You've got to capture that probably in the first 5 minutes of conversation, which means that you got to do your research, right? And of course, we're in the golden age of research too. You can get just about anything you want on a company and a person before meeting with them, but you've got to be hyper personalized and hyper focused there. And we always tell our clients, if you can do a discovery call before you do that initial call, it'd be great. But sometimes you can't. So you just got to be ready to go and ready to shift into that value conversation. And by the way, always interesting to hear about people going the other way. But I think what we see, again, with a lot of our clients is kind of almost a shyness. I don't want to say that relationships aren't important in the US market, but I think it is much, much, much more transactional, right? And you build that relationship.
Much more accepting of your profession, which is incredible,
right.
Dan. So you don't have to break down the layers. And I think it's a positive, because you can really get into the meat of the problem you're trying to tackle. But you've got to prove in different ways. And I think by the way, in the UK, we do complex sales processes. We meet many different people, and in Europe as well. So of course, you've got to have the material and supporting documents, and the business case documents that we're evolving now, utilizing AI from conversational intelligence. These things are really, truly landing. But it's just that different first touch approach. In that first initial call, when you're building that rapport, you're building the relationship, it's completely different. US to UK, completely different.
Yeah, no, I would agree. So knowing all of that, you're now kind of relaunching Codility into the States. Walk me through kind of what you did differently this time.
So another lesson I had on the journey was, and I think a lot of people don't figure this out. So take a European city, Dan, take the UK, take France, take the Netherlands, Sweden, and you can pinpoint a major city. So you got London, you got Stockholm, you got Amsterdam, and there's a few cities in the Netherlands, actually quite a micro cities that do compete. But you have this concentration, like France and Paris, you have this concentration to one area. And then many founders head over to the US, and it's right, we're heading to the US. But you got to ask yourself the question, where? And you're not going to visit a country, you're going to visit a continent, right? The size of the US is so huge. And the cultural nuances between the East Coast, the West Coast, the Central, to the North and the South, and also the density of customers and clients that potentially exist in different locations, the complexity of doing business in different time zones, I think is really misunderstood by lots of organizations. And I was part of an organization where it was like, we're going to go and compete in the US. Who are we going to go and sell to? There's loads of people. So let's do some business development. And then all of a sudden you start to see this like diminishing returns, or, hey, the person in that location kind of needs that, and the person over here needs that. So we need to build all of this stuff. And it could be anything in general administration that you got to go and build, or you got to build something financially, or the way to collect payments or do taxes. All these things can be very different. And it can be off-putting, because then you start doing different things for the size of the deal that looks pretty much the same wherever you go. So I kind of heard that the first time around. We made a few mistakes, we pulled it back, and then we started doing much better when we got focused into a location. So I always recommend that if you're going to the US for the first time, like, where do you want to be? Where's the density of your customers? Please do the mapping before you go and venture into the market. And then really set up shop around the density of your initial customers and start expanding the use case that way. So with us the second time round, it's not that we didn't have data, because Codility, we had offices in San Francisco many years ago, but we had kind of a smaller team. So we really reduced it back, pulled it back. The idea for pulling it back was, one, we were very much winning in home turf the first few months of coming back to Codility. And also I wanted to get the playbook right with a tight group of people that were situated around me, so we could start deploying and getting a winning team, and then re-attack the market or reapproach the market with a more measured approach. So that means is, what types of businesses can we sell to? I won't mention all of our trade secrets, because a competitor may be listening into the call, so I won't reveal the family silver just yet. But we made a concerted effort to sell to types of businesses that operate and live in a certain part of the US. And now our CEO has just moved into location in the best place. So candidly, she's in New York for a reason, where we've got high density of customers, density of prospects, but we get very targeted and tailored on our approach to market. But not only that, we then need to compete on, and there's so many things like AI regulatory affairs that come into play, like how are we competing with those sorts of things? And do our customers, if you care about AI regulation, you're probably going to care about Codility right now because of our rigor. So that's a certain group of customers that look a certain way. So we really started testing a few hypotheses and seeing where we're about to win. And then what we're doing now is we're scaling up the region. So we're very successful in the US. We've got a very successful group of customers, but we're starting to win more and more prospects in the region as well. But we became extremely focused where we want to spend our time, types of businesses, and also the approach, which meant that I spent a bit of time in the US last year, visiting customers, deploying the playbook, seeing how it would land. And now when we go to hire in the market, I'm not looking for someone where I'm going to them saying, I need you to build me a strategy. I need to, basically give you something that's really big and going to take you a lot of time to kind of figure these things out. But I'm going to be out of control. I'm not going to be able to identify when you're winning, when you're on track. So I think any founder that's entering into the US market, like, go spend time, even move to region. Very important that you go do these things, but also run those early initial conversations yourself. The challenge you're going to have is that you're never going to have the cultural awareness of the US. So if you're a Brit like me and you're heading out, you're just not going to understand certain things, complexity of certain professions, and just the nuance of how the US is operating, working, geopolitical situations, all these things that really help you in certain sales cycles you're not going to have. But that's where you start to embed your initial team in play, who do have that experience, do have that understanding. But if they're going in and shaping that, plus a playbook, plus identifying ICP, plus everything else that needs to take place, I really see those businesses failing to adopt or grow as quickly as the ones that spend that time figuring it out.
Yeah, you're so right about that. I think, and it's disappointing to us, because we'll talk with people, sometimes people that come to Greater Gain Group, they failed 2, 3, 4 times. I mean, and it's hard, right, to pick up the pieces. But what you said is just so true, that you've got to build the engine before you add the fuel, right? And we talk a lot about that. Say, hey, you're building a money-making machine, but you've got to build that, because you can hire the best salespeople in the world to come in, but if you don't have that engine built and that system built for them to operate in, they're going to fail, because it's very rare that you can find somebody that build like both, right? You've used the analogy, you can't build an airplane and also operate it at the same time. It's just very difficult to do that. And I think, talking about what you said, one other thing I would add is, sometimes it is geographical, right? Where you've got a geographical concentration, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's focused in a certain market segment or segments. But yeah, just so much wisdom. I'm sure that when we break this episode up into a number of short clips, a lot of them are going to come from that last section, because what you said there was just so accurate. So I want to start to kind of wind up here, but could you give me 2 or 3 kind of, since this is the Seriously Don't Do That podcast, could you give me 2 or 3 seriously don't do that for anybody looking at expanding into the US market?
Yeah, I think the first one to recap is, don't underestimate the size and breadth of the market you're operating into. And there is no founder that can come from Europe that will be that is sold into a bigger market. Fact. And I think and see that most start getting that wrong at that point in time. And the number of people I've advised or spoken to that have a lack of awareness of that, that's my first lesson, is you're dealing with a continent. Think of the US like you think of Europe. And if you take that piece of advice, you'll be a little bit more successful. The second thing is, you have to conform. You have to understand how the US operates, how people operate. The best thing I would do is probably take a lesson in understanding entrepreneurship within the US. And I think there's some great literature on that. But if you can understand the cultural understanding of business in the US, you'll do slightly better. And I think the US is a land of real opportunity, where they really advocate for people being successful. Then that can help you to understand how people adapt to sales processes. And that goes back to how I showed up the first time, right? It's really understanding that people are super friendly, super supporting of you, but they want to see you're going to take your chance. And I think that a lot of people get that wrong when they first start selling into the US as well. So truly trying to understand the psychology of people will help you too. The third thing I say is find the right partner. Like, find the right partner for you. And what I mean by find the right partner when you're making the move over is, you need someone that just understands how the market comes together and gives you the right advice. So where I see a lot of people go wrong is they'll go and appoint an advisor or look for an advisor that's not known to them. So I think, Dan, you're doing some great value to the market right now because you're bringing on different people to give value out to people thinking about making these moves and setting up businesses. But truly start to network out. So the first person you bring on board is going to give you quick feedback loops to what's working, what's not. The worst thing you can do is bring someone on board that you don't typically know, you're not met with. Feedback loops are quite long, so you can't work out what's working, what's not, with the kind of psychological safety of someone telling you the truth. Like, hey, Dan, you and I are in this together. You're probably going to fail, but I want you to tell me that we're failing, not tell me that everything's on track until month 6. When you tell me something's going to fail and we've lost 5 months, it may be unrecoverable. So they're my 3 things to truly kind of get right. And if you start to get those right, you'll be a little bit more successful by knowing that, I think.
No, I look, I think all of that is tremendous advice. Actually, if you could see, if I could flip my camera around and point it the other way, you would see there are 3 framed pictures on the wall with teams around the phrase "fail fast." We say that a lot, and I've done that because you definitely want to know that, and you are absolutely going to fail and stumble, but you want to do that fast and you want to iterate. You don't want somebody that's going to paint you a rosy picture. You want them to be blunt with you, and I think sometimes that's difficult, right? Especially with European founders, because they're not used to maybe somebody being very blunt with it. But I think it's very important to get that feedback, get it quickly, and to fail fast. So let's close on a positive note here. If there's one thing that a founder should do before hiring their first US salesperson, what would it be?
Go hang out with your prospective clients in that market, but do so without an agenda first. Just go hang out and learn.
No, I think that is tremendous advice. And I think that's probably a great place for us to land the episode here. So, Todd, want to thank you for sharing your wisdom with us today. It has been valuable to me. I've learned something. Hopefully, our listeners of the Seriously Don't Do That podcast will do that. What's the best place if people want to connect with you? What's the best place to connect with you on? Is LinkedIn the best?
LinkedIn's the best. It's I try to put a little bit of effort and time. I have a few posts that go out from here to there, various different opinions on enterprise sales. Of course, is something I enjoy, but also helping businesses to scale. But LinkedIn's the best place there.
Absolutely. Well, connect with Todd on LinkedIn. We'll put those links here into the episode notes or wherever you're watching this. They'll be down below in the notes. And Todd, want to again thank you for your time. We're both available for guidance and support. Would love to have you reach out to us, and hopefully you'll join us next time on the Seriously Don't Do That podcast.
Pleasure's mine, Dan. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Todd.